Thank you, ICMA, to have us on this panel, to have the trust in me to moderate this panel. Title says Dutch Leadership in Sustainable Finance, which I think is quite a loaded theme. But I hope, audience, you are all a bit energized and activated again after the break. Enjoyed a cup of coffee. We would like to have this panel as interactive as possible, so would like to invite you to put forward all the questions you have. We'll try to moderate and include them to get them answered. For sure, I have 100, so don't worry, but it would be lovely to include yours as well. And yeah, then maybe let's get this all started. Dutch leadership in sustainable finance. We have a quite diverse panel, so would like to get started by a little justification what makes you a Dutch leader in sustainable finance. So maybe Margriet, starting with you, as you're the head of strategy and CSR within TenneT, the Dutch transmission operating system. What makes you a Dutch leader in sustainable finance?
Okay, this is kind of awkward question, isn't it? As my daughters would say. To call yourself a leader is always a bit weird, but I just learned, isn't it? We look back today, and while traveling here, I also look back because I, of course, knew this question was going to be addressed to me. Indeed, I work for TenneT, a transmission system operator. We operate and we build lots of new assets to transmit electricity. And roughly 10 years ago, we started into the journey of green finance. And actually, that part, well, makes me a leader. I was part of this journey within TenneT, extremely proud where we are today. We just had 1, 2, 3 projects that we financed. Now we have 69 as part of our portfolio. We went from millions to billions, from megawatts to gigawatts. I'm extremely proud of what we achieved within TenneT. So that's maybe what makes me a leader. Yeah.
Potentially, but then also a long journey, so we can spend for sure some time on that. Then I would, Olivier, ask you, like as CFO of BNG, one of the Dutch public sector banks, a co-colleague of mine, what makes you and your bank a leader in sustainable finance?
Thank you. Indeed, a weird question to answer, but I think it's, in all modesty, we were the first or one of the first to make the move from to try to accommodate the green bonds or sustainable bonds to a specific business model, which is not specifically financing projects, but financing entities, like municipalities and or housing associations. And we invested a lot of time, and I remember with Hans here in this panel also to set up a framework which was very unique, and still is, by the way, which allow us to really promote sustainable finance to its investors, but also with a clear effect on our clients.
Yeah, that's very clear, to adapt yourself to the new circumstances. And then maybe, Hans, it's nice to continue with you as head of the sustainable market at ING at the moment, but also a voting member of the EU Platform on Sustainable Finance. What is the achievement that you're most proud of at the moment?
Yeah, if I look at ING itself, I think, and I will end with that maybe, ING is a sustainable bank, I think, with a long history in sustainability. I remember the first sustainability reporting already in the 90s. What ING is also very well known of is the decarbonization approach. We call that Terra. It's an approach to steer the portfolio towards lower carbon. Of course, having been a member of the ExCom of the Green Bond Principles, ING has issued the first green bonds with also CBI certification back in 2015. So that's already almost 10 years ago. Yeah, and of course, what I'm very proud of is a very, let's say, strong team in debt capital markets that actually structures a significant part of the euro-denominated green, social, sustainable, and sustainability-linked bond markets, as well as sustainable finance teams across ING in all the regions across the globe. So I think, that ING is really a pioneer and also, a leader in sustainable finance.
Thank you, thank you. And then maybe to finalize from the market participant side, Isobel, you're the Executive Director of Green, Social and Impact Bonds at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, based in The Hague nowadays. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on how you look at these days?
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing that I'm most proud of, so I'm also skirting around the leadership label, is, well, I mean, for those that don't know, we were formerly NN Investment Partners, and our green, social, and impact bond platform is what I'm most proud of in the last few years. So we have 5 dedicated analysts that look at 177 data points for all of the bonds that come to the market. Our database at the moment for green, social, and impact bonds has just under 3,000 bonds in it, and we engage with nearly 200 issuers on our green, social, and impact bonds team per year. So this is a really dedicated team that's only focusing on those labeled bonds and the impact that they could have. And I think that is, our special sauce, thing I'm most proud of, because this isn't just something we do on the side next to, credit analysis. This is something that we're really dedicated to. We have a whole platform to it. We have our reports and all of the information that we put together to make sure that we're making that strong assessment. I think that's where we really stand out and what we've been working hard to improve on the last few years. And I think at the point we are today, I would even humbly say that that is a leadership point for us.
Yes, understood. So I think what we do have in common is that we've been involved at the early stage and still continue to work on it. But luckily, we also invited Tabor. Tabor is working at the AFM, which is the Dutch Financial Markets Authority. Apparently, at some point, you got also involved. So can you maybe explain a bit how your philosophy from the authority side has been on this topic?
Sure. When looking back, and I think it's been said before, right, we've come a long way. I think as AFM back, I think it was around 2019, we were confronted with a market with green bonds being issued in the Netherlands and at the same time, particularly SLBs in France, and there was no regulatory guidance at the time. And I think we joined forces at the time with France as we shared the same vision and started to work towards issuing a set of guidances on what we felt would be important in disclosure. And I think that is something which I'm actually proud of my colleagues, because at the time I wasn't yet at the AFM, but it also strikes me, and we've said that before earlier, right, how far we've come actually, that back in 2019 that there was no regulatory guidance at all. And if I look now at some of the statements which ESMA has published, basically what we see there is that the work which France and the Netherlands have been doing has been consolidated in their statements, and as such, our work has basically been a agenda-setting exercise, and that actually fits overall how we feel about this. Because, like some of the others, and I'm happy with that, is we're a bit uncomfortable with the phrasing Dutch leadership, as we're striving every day towards European convergence. And I'm happy to say that this, for me, is a nice example of how we've done that over time.
Yeah, so thank you for elaborating on that. Though, just to have like a bit of an in-depth question to that, like what is from the authority perspective, what are the expectations to the market participants that we do have here around the table?
Sure. Look, I think there's a few items which for us in disclosure, right? I'm particularly talking about disclosure here, are important for us, and I'm happy to hear that some of the debates earlier in panels were already touching upon those. But if you make claims around green, we'll always look towards substantiation. So we want to see all material information in there. And what is interesting to know is that if you look at green or sustainability or social, is that it, in essence, isn't something new, right? If you look at the prospectus regulation, it basically already says that all material information needs to be in there. And what I'm happy to see is that for us, it's also very important that these claims are also descriptive, comprehensible. And I think the principles help in that. We've also talked about some of the other frameworks and guidances like EUGB, and in my view, those are all compatible because they work towards creating comprehensibility. The other one is around use of proceeds, so be clear on the management and the use of proceeds, and also what are eligibility criteria for the selection of your projects to be financed with the proceeds. The other one is, what we're very keen on, is not to see any disclaimers around things issuers can actually control. So that is something we'll also be keen on. And the last point is actually consistency throughout all of the publications. So we don't very often see it, but sometimes we see that parties are slightly more enthusiastic in their non-prospectus publications than they are in their prospectus publications. And we feel that there needs to be consistencies. No sustainability claims in advertisements or in any of those materials if you don't also take it up in prospectuses. So those are 4, I think, clear points of guidance towards issuers.
Clear points, though can imagine for us as market participants, sometimes it also feels like homework. It's a framework setting, and normally framework setting comes, I think, with challenges. At least that's how I received it. Anyone to primary respond on it?
Maybe I have an additional question then, Tabor. So, of course, it's very good and necessary that we are all transparent about how green our assets are, and that we say what we actually finance in the prospectus. But do you think we should not also be transparent about the rest?
Well, you're touching upon a good point, I think, and what we would encourage, particularly issuers, to do is to take the broader view and not necessarily see it as a tick-the-box exercise, right? If you are working on sustainability as an issuer, this will impact your strategy. I always have a bit of difficulty with the terming, for instance, non-financial disclosure, because some of these items, they do impact cash flow generating capabilities of an issuer going forward. So I would say, yes, we would encourage parties to look at their efforts in a broader sense. And with the CSRD coming up, I think one of our points of review will going to be how does some of your work impact your strategy in the longer term, and what risks are associated, right? If you are in a business where changes need to be made, and if you don't undertake them, what will that actually mean in the long run? So that is something which we are and will be more keen on also once additional legislation has been put in place.
But then maybe, Hans, because it's interesting question you've been asking, but you have of course seen multiple clients building up their sustainable frameworks and to make sure that they have the money get flown to their sustainable activities. In that respect, are you saying, is it worth to be green? Is it still worth to be green?
Yeah, I can answer that, but Margriet also wanted to respond, I think.
Yeah, but please go ahead, and then I will go.
Yeah, of course it is worth to be green, but it roots in a strategy, like you said, and it is going to be much more important, I think, going forward. So if I look at the discussions that I have with issuers in the past, let's say 2 years, compared to the 10 years before, then it is clearly about what are you actually doing. So it's not just about identifying the green assets. Of course, we still need to do that, but it's also about, is that part of a wider plan, a broader plan, and how much do you actually spend on that plan? And then you also enter the tough discussions, and also the SPO providers are more critical nowadays, and so they ask more evidence for the uses of proceeds, but also the strategy that makes that possible. So everybody looks into the real things more often. I also don't think that many of the issuers want to greenwash. So everybody wants to avoid that, of course, and then transparency helps. So we should also not overdo that. The green bond principles have been really instrumental in the last years and are still in, let's say, fighting greenwashing. It is a very good standard, has resulted in reliable markets.
Yeah, and maybe to respond to that from the issuer perspective, very much agree. Greenwashing is not what we should strive for. We should make sure that that doesn't happen, that what we do here, what we would like to finance in a green way, is seen as green. What I want to add from an issuer perspective and kind of the call to action to make it part of a broader strategy, I think it's actually the only way that it will survive. If you as an issuer work on sustainable finance without having your sustainability strategy, I don't think it will survive. You need, as a company, like we do, need to understand what your own sustainable impact is, translate that into a strategy, and then start with your sustainable finance, and not the other way around. I'm a strong believer that that's the way it should go. And then we need the financial market, we need all of you here to challenge us as an organization and to prevent us from greenwashing, to make sure we are transparent, but also to bear with us, because the whole non-financial impact that we have as an organization is not always that straightforward as it might look. In our case, I'm not sure if you know our business, but an SF6 leakage, I can talk for hours about it. It looks simple, it is not always in reality. So that is where we need to learn together to make that sustainable impact, because that's what we would like to do. So as an issuer, that's what we have been developing over the years, learning on our side, but I also believe learning on your side, what we experienced, especially, I also told that to you on the phone, 10 years ago when we started with green finance, we didn't get so many questions, in all honesty. I was afraid for many critical questions, and I remember, Gerrit, I'm not sure where you're still there, but Margriet, are there critical questions? I'm not sure. Nowadays, we get lots of critical questions from the financial world. That's good news. I consider that good news. Sometimes internally we consider that a headache, in all honesty. But that's how it goes, and I think that's a real good development. Preventing us from greenwashing, making statements that are not correct. At the same time, we're on a journey. We're not there as an organization. I believe many of my colleague issuers that issue green bonds are in the same kind of development journey. So learning together is also important. It's not black and white, a sustainable journey that we are on.
Thank you. And maybe just a question that pops up at my head, at least, working for a public sector bank. Olivier, maybe you want to elaborate on that, because most part of our client groups are not part of, for example, those kind of regulations as CSRD, EU taxonomy. How do you cope as a bank with that?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that you should stick to your strategy and to your purpose. So what I explained earlier on is that we're one of the early adopters of players in this field. And the downside of it is that we started 10 years ago, and then comes the regulation, right? And it's how to make those two fit. And right now it's not the case. So I'm not going to do taxonomy bashing here, but because I see it as a journey. Right now, to be honest, it's just homework, as you said. It's like additional work for me because I need to do a whole lot of new reports and data collection, etc. with my team. And it's public information, by the way. We have a GAR of 1%. So, heydays, but it doesn't fit our purpose. So you need to be very. How I cope with it is to be extremely transparent with, especially with the investors community, and in constant dialogue with them. Say, okay, this is how we tackle it because we are a special animal within this whole field. This is how we measure it. It all relies on public statistics. And I'm also quite proud of our team, who's really in contact, almost daily contact with investors, taking this feedback and changing our framework, because our framework has evolved over the years, actually. And it's been very successful for that part. So I think it's a journey on both sides, so on the regulatory side and on the issuer side. And I'm sure our path will meet someday.
Hopefully we do, but maybe, Isobel, I'm very curious, how do you perceive this as an asset manager, building up on that?
Yeah, I'm also not going to bash the regulator, but
However.
yeah, so I mean, say you're an Article 9 fund and you are producing all of the disclosures that come with being an Article 9 fund, you're looking at the EU taxonomy, you're looking at the EU Green Bond Standard when that comes out, you're looking at CSRD, you're looking at the Paris line benchmarks, you're looking at the principal adverse indicators, by the way, none of which link to each other, so you have to get new information for each one, and then figure out what you can use from each one to pass on to the next. But actually, in the end, you have to restart each exercise individually. And at the end of the day, what this does is, and actually this leads on quite well from a conversation I was having with Hans yesterday. We'll see a good issuer come to the market, and perhaps they have a lot of good information and a strong transition plan, but they do not have the specific data points that we need to meet all of that regulation and to meet our commitments that we've committed to. And so in the end, yes, that's great information that the issuer has provided, but if you're not, meeting the principal adverse indicators, or your EU taxonomy data is not good, or, whatever it might be, then, we have to stop there. And it's a bit of a shame for those issuers that aren't meeting, that side of the regulation, in that, I think that good work sometimes gets a bit lost, a bit forgotten.
Yeah, it is of course a learning process. Maybe also some good news. The EU, the Commission has just published a fact sheet on the Sustainable Finance Plan. More than 250 billion is taxonomy aligned in Europe in terms of capex reported last year. That is still only a little bit, so we need the green bond principles for a very long time. But also 56% of the investors use the SFDR framework successfully. So yeah, you could say that it is also, although it's a learning process, it also helps to grow the sustainable markets. Well, one last thing I would like to say also to the regulator, it's important that we are not just looking at the greenwashing. We want to avoid that issuers are afraid of issuing labeled bonds, basically afraid of labeling something, because that then avoids any greenwashing claim. So that's why it's important to look broader than just, let's say, the green assets.
Yeah, I'm happy to be representing all of the regulators, and I think also all the legislators out there, which I'm not. So a few words from me there. Look, we do understand that it's complex, and I think that's also the reason for me being here, is also to hear back from issuers, underwriters, investors, advisors on to learn. I think it's also a testament, if you look at the final report on greenwashing, which ESMA issued earlier this month, is that no fines have been issued, no severe measures have been taken. So I think the NCAs throughout Europe acknowledge that this is something which is not an easy task. I think if you look at it from a regulatory perspective, and just a bit of insight there, is we basically work mostly from a knowing, from knowledge, ability, and willingness perspective. So it's only when we see that a party is knowingly unwilling to take any steps that we will take a next step and have a tough conversation. And all in all, we try to work and be as transparent and open as we can. I mean, we are a regulator, We do not want to be an ivory tower or black box regulator. Again, hence my presence. And in general, I think if you look at all of those frameworks, yes, there are imperfections. That's something which we as an executory body, I would say, almost. We are not the legislator, so we also need to deal with what is there, and we also have debates, and particularly on a European level, all 20 member states strive for convergence, so we also have discussions on how do we tie in some of these things. But I think what is an important one, and it's been mentioned before as well, is there is the risk of getting into a binary situation, right? It's either green or not green, and everyone is trying to push themselves into this framework or any framework which may squeeze out very good efforts and perhaps efforts which have a bigger impact than just going from green to very green. And I think that is something which has also been acknowledged by ESMA, that there is work to be done, and that is I would say, lacking at the moment. And that's as far as I can take it here.
Well, thank you, because I think this is a very nice contribution from an authority perspective, the least. So to summarize, I think you for sure want to enable that we, as Dutch leaders in sustainable finance, remain able to pioneer on that. So maybe it's the right time to discuss a bit on the future path. What are the most important next steps from a market perspective?
I can go first, yeah. So I think for us, we are looking to the market now for improvements in impact reporting. That's sort of what we're engaging with issuers most often about. That can be anywhere from, how to deal with enabling technologies in impact reporting. Do we need to, not always be chasing the highest number, because, that's where enabling technologies can sometimes get a bit lost when you're just looking for quantitative, tons of CO2 saved, and sort of making sure enabling technologies are integrated and, given the right respect in terms of impact. And then also in terms of, the supply chain of, when we have renewable technologies, are we considering the supply chain that it took to get those, metals and minerals and, everything we need for electronics and batteries to the point where we're making those renewables and those batteries and those electric cars. That's also something that we've been thinking about. And also the fact that we have this tons of CO2 avoided number at the moment on the green bond markets, it would be great, to put that in context of the issuer. So, these projects have these tons of CO2 avoided, but what does that look like in comparison to the issuer themselves and their overall profile? That's also another topic that we've been asking the market about.
May I ask you maybe a question on that second point? So you mentioned the value chain, that you want to invest in the entire value chain. I think that's a really great idea, what we really need in the market. So the example would then be you finance the OEMs, the car manufacturers at the end, and then also you finance maybe the recycled textiles in the interiors, and you finance the, let's say, the battery manufacturers and everything else that you need for an electric vehicle. So does that mean that you as an investor are really looking for issuers in all the parts of the value chain and trying to buy bonds or something? Or can I maybe expect a phone call? Which issuers you want to issue green bonds?
We're not allowed to do that, so no. But yeah, in general, I would say that, for the sectors that there is guidance on the market already, like from the EU taxonomy and EU GBS, we stick to those guidances for those sectors that it exists for. But a lot of the enabling technologies do not yet have their own prescriptive guidance on the market. So at that point, then the investor kind of, steps in and comes up with their own in-house view. And for us, we do want to encourage enabling technologies as well on the market that, they are contributing, even if it's, in an indirect way further down the supply chain. We do need all of those different components to produce that end result. So I think, at the moment, we don't see a lot of it on the market, but we expect that at some point, enabling technologies will get more of a limelight.
Yeah, maybe from our side is the social side of sustainability, right? That needs to be developed further. Rightly so, the focus up to now was the CO2 and environment. But I think the next steps should be social, and the first steps have been taken from the regulator, which I'm very happy with. But still it's a journey, and and to look at the impact that we have as a bank, as a promotional bank. We're financing 50% of the social housing in the Netherlands, 2/3 of the municipalities, and it's so we have a very big positive impact, which is quite difficult to translate into into a taxonomy alignment or existing standards. I forgot to mention also good work from the ICMA on the social bonds, but there's still way to go actually.
Because I think that's quite interesting. Because how, as a bank, do you look at to make sure that they will not stay behind, so to say, as public sector, not being part or required to report under the CSRD?
Yeah, there's the again to really to engage with your clients, engage with your investors, and respond to their needs, because a lot of investors also do also want to invest in social bonds and have a positive social impact with the investments. So we have lots of discussions and. Also, somehow educate also the market somehow on how does it work, especially in the Netherlands, which is a very specific setup. If you look at social housing, so I spent a lot of time on the road also explaining how it works, which is not the most simple thing to do, but very rewarding, and it works. And again, for me, the secret is transparency. This is how it works. Those are the data, and some investor asked me actually, okay, yeah, I got it. Just send me your data. I will process it, etc. And I think that would be the next step. And further down the road, also, it's more to look at the entities that are issuing bonds rather than the bonds themselves, right? So I think one of the panel touched upon that actually, but I strongly believe in that actually. So what is the business model? Have a holistic approach of the issues rather than focusing on bond.
Thank you. Maybe Margriet, do you still feel enabled to pioneer, to make the steps into the right direction?
Yeah, I believe we feel enabled, but I'm not sure whether we should still pioneer, because I think it's not us or kind of with the front runners alone anymore. It's much bigger than it was in the beginning. And we need to pioneer with others. One example that I would like to give, which also connects to what was just being explained, is that indeed our value chain or our supply chain, that's where we create the impact. So we're now pioneering together with our main suppliers, for instance, the big transformer suppliers, cables. We need a lot of stuff, a lot of assets in the coming period. If we do that as sustainable as we can together, it makes a difference. We create the sustainable and environmental impact that we're looking for. And that's, I believe, where we're now. So what we need, from my perspective, is consistency on how we steer on sustainability, not kind of new ways of looking at it, because we need to be consistent. Then we can make it part of our tenders. Then we can create real impact. We have reducing CO2 emissions, more circular assets, more integration of human rights, all those kind of aspects. If we can do that together with our suppliers, we can create the impact and we can report about it. And then we have that impact that we're looking for. That would be the next phase that I would see in our pioneering. Yeah.
Sounds like a motivational story as well. I think, the value chain element, I think we can't neglect that and should embrace it in that sense. Hans, also to you. Also, as the voting member of the EU Platform in Sustainable Finance, what is your ultimate green dream?
Yeah, I think what we currently see in the platform is we want to make sure that we have real world impact. Maybe the regulation is sometimes a little bit too complex, so the usability must be improved. We work very hard on that. But let's say if I look at the experience that I have in my, let's say, daily job, talking to companies and financial institutions, then it is really about understanding the transition better. And that is then the question, okay, what are you going to do in your transition? What is the abatement curve? What are the various investments that you do? And how are you going to finance those individual steps? And it can be bonds, of course, but it can also be bank loans, guaranteed loans, off-balance sheet financing via project financing, and all the other instruments. So the discussion is becoming more, let's say, real, I would say. So it is not just about labeling, it is really about financing the right transition. Yeah, and I think I want to also echo everything that was said about the supply chain again. Maybe two other small, before I say something more about that, two other small things that I think will happen is digitization. And so I see that SPO providers, for example, are already thinking about providing digital SPOs. And that is badly needed, that we are able to, let's say, machine read the SPOs and somehow automate sustainable finance. Also, the coding system in the taxonomy, we use NACE, of course, but we need, let's say, more detailed systems to really automate it and machine read sustainable finance. So, and that will happen, of course, eventually, but that's one of the trends. And maybe what we discussed interestingly before in our own briefing, we discussed housing. Housing is what some of the panelists here have in common. The European Union has just released the new Energy Performance Building Directive 4. That is the Energy Labeling Directive, which is basically a refurbishment obligation for all the buildings in Europe. And I was discussing with Olivier, you finance a lot of social housing. That is a huge challenge to refurbish that social housing to become close to zero in 2050. Half of your balance sheet is social housing. Most of the banks, that's why you also have this GAR, most of the banks have half of the balance sheet as housing. So it's an immense important topic. And then the question is, can we all work together? You also indicated we need all the suppliers in the chain to align to get our networks in place. Also for that housing transition, you need a functional network. So you need to be ahead of all the others to enable this transition. So maybe Olivier, do you want to respond?
Yeah, sure. I really welcome that sort of regulations, right? So to say, to be very positive about regulations, that's because I felt it was not getting that direction at some point, but because that's what we need really, because otherwise the market will not regulate itself on this one. So and that's sort of the missing link actually, because we all we have a commitment within the Dutch financial sector to achieve net zero. But if our clients are not committed, do not have that sort of commitment is a bit of a challenge. So this new piece of regulation you just mentioned is certainly the missing link in this whole chain, let's say. And again, I welcome that. Why? Because it will help us realizing our climate action plan, actually, which is not an objective in itself, obviously, but it's definitely an enabler to increase our positive impact. That being said, it will be a huge challenge actually, and we really need to work together with the, in the case of the social housing, with the Association of Social Housing, with the relevant ministries, because it will require also maybe a change in the way social housing are managed and supervised at central level, because in the Netherlands there's a huge shortage of houses, a huge shortage of social houses. So where do you allocate the money actually into building new houses, or to make existing houses more energy efficient? So that will be the type of dilemma that we need to address with the financiers like ourselves and the ministries, the social partners, etc.
And of course all the other stakeholders, including TenneT and the whole building industry. So we need to work together, harmonized, to get this done.
Yeah, and I think to give the TenneT answer, indeed, I also explained in here in the pre-talk that we had, a CO2-free energy system, that's what we would like, isn't it? We would like housing and kind of companies to use that CO2-free energy system. From a TenneT perspective, from a TSO perspective, we know what we have to do for our grid. We know it's a massive job, and we know we have to start in time. And time is the most important variable here, because we need to make those big decisions for our grid, but also for housing and for industry, at a certain point of time, to make sure we are in time for 2050. And to make sure that we know what we have to finance and when. So that is, for a grid operator, also an essential element where we need to work with all parties, all of you, but also governments, to make sure we get those decisions on what do we need by when in time, so that we can make sure the grid is available to get it done.
And also, of course, investors are also very important. Maybe Isobel, you want to comment here, but we recently were in the market with a green bond for an issuer that went from coal to natural gas, hydrogen-ready gas power plants that will then switch to hydrogen in 2035. So then you can discuss, okay, is a hydrogen-ready power plant green or not? According to the SPO providers, it was green, so fine. But then, of course, it can only be green in the longer term if that transition to hydrogen really takes place. And the investors were asking critical questions. Okay, are you, issuer, in control of that transition? But then it becomes really important that we all work together to also make sure that the hydrogen is there in 2035.
I'm surprised actually that they gave you a specific date for switching, because that's been something we've been asking the market quite a bit actually. So
yeah, it's the taxonomy that describes that. Yeah, but anyways, yeah.
So they were meeting it precisely. Yeah, well, I mean, that had been a question that was coming up a lot, is like hydrogen ready, but we're not sure when. So of course, for us, it's, a bit of a gamble just to, buy it and then, just assume later on that it will be fine.
Yeah, but what I mean is there you could help, making sure that other players in the team that needs to produce that hydrogen, that they do that.
Assuming we...
And that the grid operators, not you in this case, but the gas grid operators actually make sure that the grids are ready.
But I think this is exactly what we meant with the value chain, the journey that we are together at. And I think it's the housing situation in the Netherlands, but also the part that TenneT, of course, for the grid is adding to that. That's exactly why I think we are here. We need to collaborate on this. And I think as leaders in sustainable finance, we have to admit that the challenge will be accepted, that we will collaborate on this and be in touch. I'm afraid we are out of time. I had a couple of times a look at the questions, but so far so good, I have not received anything. So that leaves me just by thanking you guys. I think interesting discussions. Not sure whether we will be all around this afternoon to continue the discussion, but I think thereafter we will meet again. So thanks a lot.